In this video, we're going to discuss the binding context. When working with CRS binding, you have the view. Here you can see some examples of binding expressions happening. And these binding expressions need to be exercised on a binding context. So what is the binding context? The binding context is the class that provides the perspective or context for the binding to happen in. So in the case of the welcome screen, I have the welcome screen view and the welcome screen view model, and the view model is the binding context. So whenever you're working with something like the view base on CRS binding or a bindable element, that is the binding context that you bind against. So what it goes onto the binding context? All the properties that you set go into the binding context. Events that fire go into the binding context. Functions that you want to call need to exist on the binding context. So whenever I express myself from a binding engine perspective in the view, the source of truth for that binding is the binding context.